The Dominion had ruled the Orion arm of the galaxy for 12,000 years. They were tall creatures with gray skin, 4 arms, and eyes that saw in spectrums humans could not imagine. 7 different alien species bowed to their authority. Their warships numbered in the millions. Their technology could crack planets open like eggs, and in all that time, no one had ever challenged them. High Arbiter sat in his command chamber aboard the flagship Eternal Judgment, reading a report that should have been routine. A new species had crawled out of some forgotten corner of space. They called themselves humans. They came from a small blue planet orbiting an ordinary yellow star. They had just discovered faster-than-light travel, and they had built their first colony on a world in the system. Made a sound that was something like a laugh. New species emerged every few centuries. The process was always the same. Send a fleet, make demands, accept their surrender, add another servant race to the Dominion. It was almost boring by now. He gave the order. 50 warships would be more than enough. 8 months later, those ships arrived at the human colony world. The humans had named it New Montana, after some region on there. It was a green planet with vast plains, tall mountains, and about 3,000 human colonists living in a single settlement near a river valley. They had come to mine rare minerals and build a new life far from their crowded Earth. Commander Jack watched the alien ships appear in orbit from the colony's small command center. He was 42 years old, with gray hair cut short and a face that looked like it had been carved from stone. Before becoming the colony's security chief, he had spent 20 years as a Marine on Earth. He had seen combat on 3 continents. He had buried friends. He had learned that the universe was not a kind place. But he had never seen anything like this. 50 ships, each one larger than anything humans had ever built, hanging in the sky like metal gods. Dr. Grace Miller stood beside him, her heart beating so fast she thought it might burst. She was the colony's, a scientist who had spent her entire career hoping that humanity was not alone in the universe. Now that hope had become reality, and she did not know whether to laugh or cry. The alien message came through on all frequencies. An officer appeared on the screen, speaking in a language that the colony's computers struggled to translate. The message was simple. The humans would surrender their colony and all its resources. They would accept rule. They would provide workers for Dominion mining operations. In return, they would be allowed to live. Jack looked at the faces around him. Miners, engineers, farmers, families who had traveled across the stars to build something new. He thought about his daughter back on Earth, about the world he had fought to protect, about every human who had ever refused to kneel. He pressed the communication button. His voice was calm. "This is Commander Jack, representing the colony of New Montana. We thank you for your visit, but we will not be surrendering today, or any day. We suggest you turn your ships around and go home." The translator must have worked because the alien officer's eyes widened. For a long moment there was silence. Then the spoke again, and this time his voice was cold. Humans had 1 hour to reconsider. After that, there would be consequences. Jack turned off the screen. Everyone get to the shelters, now. The colonists had prepared for emergencies. Cave systems in the mountains had been converted into bunkers. Food and water had been stockpiled. It was not much, but it was something. Jack helped organize the evacuation while Grace Miller gathered her research equipment and her samples. She kept looking at the sky, at those massive ships, and wondering if this was how humanity's first contact with alien life would end. The hour passed. They did not wait for a response. The first energy beam hit the center of the colony. The administration building vanished in a flash of light. The second beam struck the housing district. The third hit the school. Grace was running toward the mountain shelters when the blast wave knocked her off her feet. She hit the ground hard, her ears ringing, her vision blurred. Through the smoke and fire, she could see people screaming, running, falling. A child was crying somewhere nearby. A man was trying to drag a wounded woman toward safety. The sky was filled with fire. 200 people died in those first 5 minutes. Men, women, and children who had done nothing wrong except refuse to be slaves. The ships continued their bombardment for another hour, reducing the colony to rubble and ash. When they finally stopped, they sent landing craft down to the surface to claim their prize. But something unexpected happened. When the alien soldiers landed, they did not find broken survivors begging for mercy. They found empty streets and burning buildings. They found abandoned equipment and scattered supplies. And they found, written in the dirt where the main square used to be, a single message in human letters that their translators could read. "We'll be back." Jack had led almost 3,000 colonists into the mountains. They had lost their homes, their belongings, and 200 of their people. They had nothing but the clothes on their backs and whatever they had managed to grab during the evacuation. But they were alive, and they were angry. High Arbiter received the report 3 days later. The colony had been successfully. Human casualties were acceptable. There was some minor resistance in the mountains, but it would be dealt with soon. Another easy conquest for the Dominion. He filed the report and moved on to other matters. The humans were insignificant, a primitive species barely out of their own atmosphere. They would learn their place soon enough. What did not know, what he could not possibly understand, was that somewhere out in the black void of space, a message was already traveling toward Earth. A message that carried images of burning buildings and dead children. A message that would awaken something ancient and terrible in the human species. Humanity had spent its entire existence fighting the elements, fighting disease, fighting each other. They had survived ice ages and plagues and wars that killed millions. They had crawled out of caves and reached for the stars. And in all that time, they had learned one lesson above all others. When someone hurts your family, you do not negotiate. You do not forgive. You hit back so hard that no one ever dares to hurt them again. They had just killed 200 human beings. They had no idea what they had started. The message reached Earth 17 days after the attack. It traveled through relay stations and communication satellites until it finally arrived at United Nations headquarters in New York City. A young communications officer named Lisa Park was the first to see it. She watched the footage 3 times before she could bring herself to believe it was real. Within 6 hours, every government on Earth had seen the same images. Burning buildings, bodies in the streets, children running from alien weapons, and at the end, a desperate recording from Commander Jack explaining what had happened and asking for help. Humanity had always been divided. Nations argued over borders and resources. Politicians fought over power and ideology. Wars had been fought over things as small as a single insult. But in that moment, watching alien ships destroy a human colony, something changed. The American president called the Russian president. The Chinese premier called the European Council. Old enemies picked up phones and spoke words that would have been unthinkable a day before. By the end of the week, the United Earth Defense Force had been created. Every nation contributed ships, soldiers, and resources. Arguments that had lasted centuries were put aside in minutes. Admiral Hayes was chosen to lead the new fleet. He was 60 years old, with white hair and eyes that had seen too much. He had commanded naval forces in 3 different conflicts on Earth. He understood war better than most people understood their own families. And when he saw the footage from New Montana, he felt something he had not felt in years. Cold, focused rage. "We're going to find them," he said to his staff during their first meeting, "and we're going to teach them why you never hurt human beings." Meanwhile, on New Montana, they were learning that lesson the hard way. Jack had set up camp in a cave system deep in the mountains. Almost 3,000 colonists were crammed into the dark tunnels, eating emergency rations and sleeping on bare rock. It was cold. It was uncomfortable, but they were alive, and that was what mattered. The aliens had sent search parties into the mountains. They expected to find frightened civilians who would surrender at the first sign of force. What they found instead was something their species had never encountered before. Human beings who fought back. Jack organized the colonists into groups. The former soldiers and police officers became fighters. The engineers built traps and weapons from salvaged materials. Even the children helped, carrying messages between groups and watching for enemy patrols. Every night, small teams would leave the caves and strike at the alien occupation force. The lost 3 soldiers on the first night. They stepped on a pressure plate that triggered an explosion. The aliens had never seen such primitive but effective technology. They lost 5 more the second night when a team of humans ambushed their patrol with homemade rifles and hunting knives. By the end of the first week, 20 alien soldiers were dead. High Arbiter received these reports with growing confusion. The humans should have surrendered by now. Every other species did. They always did. Why were these creatures different? He ordered his intelligence officers to research the human species. What they found disturbed him deeply. Humans had evolved on a world with extreme conditions. Their planet had ice ages that lasted thousands of years. It had deserts where nothing could survive. It had predators that could kill with a single bite. And somehow, humans had conquered all of it. They were persistent predators. Their ancestors had hunted by chasing animals across vast distances, running for hours and even days until their prey collapsed from exhaustion. They did not need to be faster or stronger than their victims. They simply needed to refuse to stop. Their bodies were designed for damage. They could survive wounds that would kill most species. They could fight through pain that would paralyze others. They pumped chemicals through their blood that let them ignore fear and injury when necessary. One scientist examined a captured human body and found that humans lived in a constant state of mild stress that most species would consider dangerous. And their history, their bloody, endless history. Humans had been waging war against each other for their entire existence. They had built weapons that could destroy cities. They had killed millions of their own kind in conflicts over land and resources and ideas. They had even created weapons that could end all life on their planet, and they had not been afraid to use them. The report ended with a warning that did not want to believe. Humans were not like other species. They did not surrender when the odds were against them. They did not give up when they were hurt. They fought harder. Dr. Grace Miller saw this from the other side. She had been captured during the initial attack while trying to help wounded colonists. Now she was held in a cell on the alien command ship, studied like a laboratory animal. The aliens asked her questions through translation devices. They wanted to know how humans worked. Why did they keep fighting? Why did they not accept defeat? What was wrong with them? Grace gave them the only answer she could. We're human. This is what we do. She watched the aliens examine other prisoners. They were confused by human behavior. When a young man named Danny refused to answer their questions, they beat him. He did not cry. He did not beg. He just looked at them with cold eyes and said nothing. The aliens did not understand. Grace understood. She had grown up in a small town in Kansas. She had learned to ride horses before she could read. She had worked her way through college and graduate school by sheer determination. She had traveled across the galaxy because she wanted to know what was out there. Giving up was not in her nature. It was not in any human's nature. One night, an officer came to her cell. He was different from the others. He seemed almost respectful. He told her that the Dominion had sent a message to her people, demanding their surrender. He expected Earth to comply. Grace actually laughed. It was a sound that seemed to frighten the alien more than any weapon could. "You killed our children," she said. "You burned our homes, and you think we're going to surrender." The officer did not understand. His species had always surrendered when faced with superior force. It was logical. It was sensible. Why die when you could live as a servant? Grace leaned forward. Her voice was quiet but hard as steel. "We have a saying on Earth. An eye for an eye. It means if you hurt us, we hurt you back. If you kill our people, we kill yours. And we don't stop until the debt is paid." She smiled. It was not a friendly smile. "You attacked the wrong species. And when our ships get here, you're going to understand exactly what that means." The officer left without another word. That night, He sent a private message to his family, telling them to prepare emergency supplies and identify escape routes from the. For the first time in 12,000 years, a soldier was afraid. 6 months passed. On New Montana, the occupation continued. They had rebuilt the colony as a military base, bringing in supplies and reinforcements from across the Dominion. They had hunted the human survivors through the mountains, killing some, capturing others, but never finding them all. Jack had lost count of how many nights he had spent in those cold caves. His beard had grown long and gray. His eyes had become hard as stone, but he had not given up. None of them had. They continued their attacks, striking at supply lines and patrol routes, making the aliens pay for every day they stayed on human soil. On the morning of the 6-month anniversary, something changed. A young woman named was on watch duty at the cave entrance when she saw it. A flash of light in the sky, then another, then dozens more. She grabbed her radio and shouted the words that Jack had been waiting to hear. Commander, ships, human ships. 147 warships dropped out of hyperspace above New Montana. They were smaller than the vessels, rougher and less elegant. But they had been built in 6 months by a species that refused to wait. Every shipyard on Earth had worked day and night. Every factory had produced weapons and armor. Every nation had sent its best soldiers. Admiral Hayes stood on the bridge of the flagship Liberty, watching the alien fleet scramble into defensive formation. His face showed no emotion. His voice was calm when he gave the order. All ships broadcast on all frequencies. Let them know we're here. The message went out across the system. It was short and simple. This is Admiral Hayes of the United Earth Defense Force. We're here for our people. Surrender now or we will take them by force. The commander did not believe what he was seeing. His fleet outnumbered the humans 2-1. His ships were larger, more advanced, better armed. He had the advantage. He ordered his forces to attack. What followed was not a battle, it was a massacre. Human ships flew straight into the defensive lines. They took hits that would have sent any sane commander into retreat, but they did not retreat. They pushed forward, firing everything they had, accepting losses that they could not understand. The alien commander watched in horror as 3 human ships crashed directly into one of his cruisers, destroying themselves but taking the larger vessel with them. No species did that. No species threw away their own lives so freely. It was insane. But it was working. Captain Sam led a squadron of fighters through the enemy formation, weaving between massive warships like insects around giants. His voice was steady as he called out targets to his wing. Behind him, pilot after pilot followed his lead, trusting him with their lives. "Stay tight, stay focused," he said. "Remember what they did, remember why we're here." Lieutenant Commander Price commanded a destroyer that had been hit 6 times and was still fighting. Her engine room was on fire. Her weapons were running out of ammunition. Half her crew was dead or wounded. But when her first officer suggested retreat, she looked at him like he had grown a second head. "Retreat to where?" she asked. "There are humans down there, we're not leaving without them." On the planet below, Jack heard the explosions in orbit. He gathered his fighters and gave them their orders. The aliens would be distracted by the space battle. Now was the time to strike. They came out of the mountains like ghosts. After 6 months of hiding and running, they finally had support. They hit the alien base from 3 directions at once, using weapons they had built from scraps and salvaged alien technology. The soldiers were caught between the attack from space and the attack from the ground. Some of the aliens tried to use human prisoners as shields. They dragged captured colonists out into the open, expecting the attackers to stop. They did not understand humans at all. Jack saw his neighbor, a man named Pete who had helped build his house, being held at gunpoint by a soldier. Pete caught his eye and nodded. Jack understood. He raised his rifle and fired. The shot went through Pete's shoulder and into the alien's head. Pete fell, wounded but alive. The alien fell dead. Later, Pete would thank him for taking the shot. "Better a bullet from a friend than slavery to those things," he said. Jack just nodded. He understood. The battle lasted 4 hours. When it was over, the fleet was destroyed. 32 alien ships drifted dead in space. The rest had fled, jumping to hyperspace to carry news of the disaster to the... On the ground, the occupation force had been wiped out completely. Admiral Hayes came down to the surface personally. He walked through the ruins of the colony, past burned buildings and makeshift graves, until he found Jack and his survivors. The two men looked at each other for a long moment. Then Hayes held out his hand. "Hell of a fight you put up here, Commander." Jack shook it. "Hell of a rescue, Admiral." Dr. Grace Miller was found in the alien command ship, locked in a cell with a dozen other prisoners. When the rescue team broke down the door, she did not cry or celebrate. She just stood up, straightened her torn clothes, and asked one question. "What happens now?" The soldier who found her, a young sergeant named Chris, gave her a smile that held no warmth. "Now we go after them, ma'am. Every ship, every base, every planet. We're not stopping until this is finished." Grace thought about what she had learned during her captivity. They were not monsters. They were just arrogant. They had ruled the galaxy for so long that they had forgotten what real predators looked like. They had mistaken human kindness for weakness, human patience for fear. They were about to learn the truth. "They sent a message to there," she told Admiral Hayes when she met him later. "They're calling for total war against humanity." Hayes did not seem surprised. If anything, he seemed satisfied. "Good," he said. "Saves us the trouble of finding them. We were going to burn a path to their front door anyway. Now we know where to go." The fleet regrouped in orbit. The wounded were treated, the dead were honored, and preparations began for the next phase. This was no longer about rescue. This was no longer about defense. Humanity was going to war, and they were not planning to stop until the Dominion was nothing but a memory. The stars had never seen anything like them, and they were only getting started. The war spread across the stars like fire through dry grass. Humanity did not wait for the to attack again. They struck first, fast, and without mercy. Every shipyard on Earth worked around the clock. Every month brought new warships into the fleet. Every soldier who volunteered was trained and deployed within weeks. Admiral Hayes coordinated the campaign from the command ship Liberty. His strategy was simple and brutal. Hit them everywhere. Hit them constantly. Never give them time to rest or regroup. Show them that distance meant nothing, that safety was an illusion, that humanity would follow them to the ends of the galaxy if necessary. Captain Sam led strike forces deep behind enemy lines. His squadron became famous for appearing where no one expected them. They destroyed supply convoys carrying food to colonies. They blew up fuel depots that powered their fleets. They struck communication stations that linked the Dominion together. Every mission was dangerous. Every mission cost lives, but never asked his people to do anything he would not do himself. His pilots followed him into impossible situations because they trusted him completely. When his ship was damaged during a raid on a weapons factory, he flew it directly into the facility's reactor core rather than be captured. His crew ejected at the last moment and was picked up by rescue ships. The explosion destroyed the entire factory and everything within 10 kilometers. Survived. 3 days later, he was back in a new ship leading another raid. Lieutenant Commander Price became a legend at the Battle of Station, a strategic outpost that controlled 3 major hyperspace routes. The station was defended by 2,000 alien soldiers. Price arrived with 40 Marines and orders to hold the station until reinforcements came. The reinforcements were delayed by a week. For 9 days, Price and her Marines fought room by room, corridor by corridor, through that massive station. They set traps with their own equipment. They built barricades from alien furniture. They fought hand-to-hand when their ammunition ran out. When they tried to use gas attacks, the Marines held their breath and charged through the clouds. By the time relief forces arrived, 18 Marines were still alive. The station was secured. Over 1,500 soldiers were dead. The survivors told stories of humans who would not stop coming, who fought through wounds that should have killed them, who smiled as they killed. Price received the highest honors Earth could give. She accepted them quietly, then asked for another assignment. There was still a war to win. Sergeant Ben developed a different kind of reputation. He specialized in capturing enemy officers alive. Other soldiers preferred quick kills, believed that information was more valuable than revenge. He led teams that struck at command posts, disabled enemy leaders with precise shots to their legs, and dragged them back to human ships for questioning. The alien prisoners were terrified of human interrogators, not because humans used torture. They did not need to. Human interrogators were simply very, very good at making people talk. They understood psychology. They understood pressure. They understood exactly which questions to ask and when to ask them. Delivered 37 officers to intelligence during the war. The information they provided led to dozens of successful attacks, enemy battle plans, fleet movements, locations of hidden bases. The Dominion's secrets spilled out one interrogation at a time. The galactic community watched all of this with growing fear. Other species had seen wars before. They had never seen anything like this. Humans did not fight for territory or resources or even revenge. They fought to win completely. They accepted no half measures. They showed no interest in negotiation until the enemy was broken. Ambassadors from neutral species began quietly visiting Earth. They did not come to condemn or criticize. They came to ask questions. How did humans become this way? What made them different? Was there any way to make peace with them? Human diplomats answered honestly. Their world had not been kind to them. They had earned every inch of their civilization through struggle and sacrifice. They had fought their own planet, fought each other, fought diseases too small to see. War was in their blood. Peace was something they built after the fighting was done, not during. The neutral species listened and decided to stay neutral. No one wanted to give humans another enemy. High Arbiter watched his dominion crumble. 12,000 years of empire falling apart in months. His fleets were being destroyed faster than they could be rebuilt. His colonies were revolting, sensing weakness in their masters. His own council had split into factions, arguing about how to stop the human advance. Some wanted to use forbidden weapons. The Dominion had planet-killing devices stored in secret locations, weapons so terrible that they had not been used in 10,000 years. But the Council hesitated. If they used such weapons against humanity, what would the humans do in response? Finally made the decision himself. He ordered the release of a bioweapon, a virus designed to target human DNA and kill every human being it touched. The weapon was delivered secretly to a human supply station. Within days, thousands of soldiers were infected. For 3 weeks it seemed like the weapon might work. Humans fell ill by the thousands. Their advance slowed. The Dominion dared to hope. Then human immune systems adapted. Doctors on Earth worked around the clock, developing treatments and vaccines. The virus was studied, understood, and defeated. Within a month, it was nothing but a minor illness. Humans who had been dying were back on their feet. The advance resumed. But humans did not forget what had been done. Their scientists studied the bioweapon carefully. They modified it, they improved it, and they sent it back. The virus struck a colony world without warning. 18 million aliens died in 6 weeks. There was no cure. There was no treatment. It was simply payback, delivered with cold efficiency. After that, the Dominion stopped using bioweapons. Received a message from Earth's leadership. It was short and clear. You tried to kill us all. Now we are coming for you. There will be no negotiation. There will be no surrender except on our terms. Prepare to face the consequences of your choices. The High Arbiter read the message 3 times. Then he called his remaining forces back to defend the. It was all he could do. The hunt was almost over, and the prey had become the predator. Humanity was coming, and they were not planning to show mercy. 2 years after the attack on New Montana, human ships entered orbit above Prime. The of the Dominion was a beautiful planet with purple oceans and silver forests that had stood for millions of years. For 12,000 years, no enemy had ever threatened it. Now 500 human warships surrounded it like wolves around wounded prey. Admiral Hayes looked at the planet through his viewing screen. He thought about the 200 colonists who had died to start this war. He thought about every soldier who had fallen in the fighting since then. He thought about the bioweapon that had tried to kill his entire species, and he felt no pity for what was about to happen. But he was not a monster. He was a human being, and human beings believed in giving enemies a choice. "Open communications," he said. "Let them know we're here." The message went out across all frequencies. Admiral Hayes spoke slowly and clearly, knowing that translators would carry his words to billions of citizens. "This is Admiral Hayes of the United Earth Defense Force. 2 years ago, your government attacked a peaceful human colony. You killed 200 innocent people. When we defended ourselves, you tried to destroy our entire species with biological weapons. You failed." He paused, letting the words sink in. "We are not here to destroy you. We are here to end this war. These are our terms. The Dominion will be dissolved. All conquered species will be freed. Your military will be reduced to defense forces only. You will pay reparations to every species you have harmed, including humanity. You will surrender all leaders responsible for the attacks on human beings." Another pause. "You have 6 hours to accept these terms. If you refuse, we will begin landing ground forces. Your cities will fall one by one. Your people will suffer in ways you cannot imagine. We do not want this, but we will do it if necessary. The choice is yours." He ended the transmission and sat back to wait. On the planet below, chaos reigned. The High Council was meeting in emergency session, but half the members were already fleeing the capital. The fleet that was supposed to protect the had been destroyed in small pieces across the galaxy. The population was terrified, watching human ships hanging in their sky like a death sentence waiting to be delivered. High Arbiter sat alone in his chamber. He had ruled the Dominion for 30 years. He had commanded fleets that conquered solar systems. He had believed that his species was the greatest power in the galaxy. Now he understood how wrong he had been. His aide entered with a report. "The vassal species are revolting on 12 worlds. Our colonies in the outer sectors are declaring independence. 3 council members have fled. The military is requesting permission to surrender." Closed his eyes. "What have we done?" he whispered. "What have we awakened?" The answer came not from his aide but from his own memory. He remembered the reports about human nature, the persistence, the rage, the refusal to surrender or forget. He had read those reports and dismissed them as exaggeration. No species could really be that dangerous. He had been so very wrong. "Send the surrender," he said finally. "Accept all their terms." The message went out 4 hours before the deadline. The war was over. Human troops landed on Prime the next day, not to conquer but to oversee the transition. They were professional and disciplined, following orders exactly. They did not loot or destroy. They simply made sure that the Dominion kept its promises. The victory celebrations on Earth lasted for weeks. Humanity had won its first interstellar war against an enemy that had ruled the galaxy for. It seemed impossible. It was a miracle. It was proof that nothing could stop human beings when they set their minds to something. Jack returned to New Montana as planetary governor. The colony was rebuilt bigger and stronger than before. New settlers arrived from Earth, eager to build lives on the world that had become famous across the galaxy. A memorial was constructed in the center of the new city, honoring the 200 who had died in the first attack. The inscription was simple: "They thought we were prey." Dr. Grace Miller became the most famous in human history. Her research on alien psychology helped humanity understand the species they would now be dealing with as equals. She wrote books and gave lectures, but she always came back to the same point. Aliens were not so different from humans. They had the same hopes and fears. They simply needed to learn that humanity was not an enemy to be conquered, but a neighbor to be respected. Captain Sam retired from active service but continued to train new pilots. His methods were harsh and demanding, but every graduate thanked him. The skills he taught saved lives. Lieutenant Commander Price took command of a new defense station at the edge of human space. She never talked about the Battle of Station. When asked about her medals, she just shrugged and said she had been doing her job. Sergeant Ben joined the new diplomatic corps. His experience with alien prisoners made him valuable in negotiations. He found that he preferred making peace to making war, though he never forgot how to do both. Admiral Hayes was offered every honor humanity could give. He accepted none of them. He said the honor belonged to the people who had died, not to those who survived. He retired to a small house by the ocean and spent his days fishing and watching the waves. 1 year after the war ended, a delegation of alien ambassadors arrived on Earth. They represented 12 different species, including several that had been conquered by the long ago. They came to establish diplomatic relations with humanity, to join the new galactic order that was emerging from the ashes of the Dominion. The lead ambassador was a being named, or a tall creature with blue skin and 6 eyes. He had studied humans for months, trying to understand them. He had watched recordings of human battles. He had read human history. He had examined human art and music and literature. And still, he did not fully understand. As he walked through the streets of New York City, surrounded by human crowds, he saw something that finally made him comprehend. Children were playing in a park. They were running and laughing and pretending to fight with toy weapons. Their parents watched nearby, smiling. Or realized the truth. War was not something humans did reluctantly. It was built into them from childhood. They practiced it for fun. They celebrated it in their stories. They honored it in their monuments. But they did not do it because they hated others. They did it because they loved their own. Humans fought for their families, for their homes, for each other, and they would never ever stop. He turned to his aide and spoke quietly in his own language. Remember what they are. Never forget it. Never give them a reason to remember what they can become. Treat them with respect. Treat them as equals, because if we do not. He did not finish the sentence. He did not need to. The aide nodded and made a note. The warning would be added to every diplomatic file, every training manual, every piece of official communication. It would be passed down through generations. It would become the first rule of dealing with the human species. Be kind to them, be honest with them, be fair with them. And never, ever make them angry. Because humans were a friendly species. They smiled easily. They laughed often. They built beautiful things and dreamed of better worlds. But underneath that kindness was something ancient and terrible, something that had survived ice ages and plagues and wars without end, something that would burn the galaxy down before it let its children be hurt. They had learned this lesson the hard way. The rest of the galaxy would not make the same mistake.